Hey guys, got another tier list for Isekai Saga today. The triple S are going to be the best of the best. The double S are going to be really good units. The S rank are going to be the units that you're going to use if you have to, but you're going to be going for the double S and triple S rank. And once you get to the double and triple S rank, you won't need the S rank anymore. They'll ultimately be food. I just added in a couple more rows because I forgot to. It's going to be the burn duo and the tank girls. That's for specific pairs of units. And then we got the food tier. These are definitely going to be food no matter where you are in the game. You're going to be going for at least the S tier, even if you just started. So let's get into it. First off, we have Lady Zen going into the S tier. She heals front row allies with her skill. After ranking her up, she also generates 1 rage when she heals, and at Fame 3-star, her heal turns into an AoE. She's a decent healer. There's better healers out there, but if you need a healer, you can use her. Laura, I'll put into S tier as well. Her skill attacks the enemy column and applies mark for 2 turns, which increases their damage taken by 5% per mark up to 3 stacks. At 9-star, the max stack increased to 5, and the base attack gets a chance to apply it. Fame 1-star gives her a 25% chance to counterattack. Fame 3-star increases her final damage reduction by 12. Divine 1-star increases stacks to 8. So it's a potential 40% increase in damage taken by the enemies, but she seems a bit better than she is because it's going to be really hard to get those max stacks on enemies. And although fights are lasting longer now, so you'll have a better chance, but it just doesn't slot into teams very well. There's just some better options for increasing damage. Hades, I'm also going to put into S tier. He deals pretty good single target damage that has a 50% chance to poison the enemy. If they're poisoned already, the damage increases by 30%. At 9-star, after inflicting poison, is skill cast again with 50% damage up to 3 times per turn. At Fame 1-star, trait is a 100% chance to cause poison. Fame 3-star traits, when killing a target, deals 45% overflow damage to each remaining officer, and Divine 1-star ups that overflow damage to 60%. And also inflicts poison to a random enemy hit by splash damage. On paper, this guy looks like he deals some really good damage. I've literally never seen anybody use him, and there's just not any reason to. Poison teams are just non-existent in this game, so use him if you need a damage dealer and you're starting. If otherwise, just skip him. Gilgamesh, I'm actually going to put into SS tier for now. He has a lowish damage AoE that can be buffed quite a bit, but it's dependent on having more rage than the target. But keep in mind, you're not using this guy for damage. So he slots really well into the rage generating teams, who restores 1 rage to all allies after casting a skill, and basic attacks have a 50% chance of stealing 1 rage from the enemy. He also restores 2 rage to self and the highest attack ally after the skill is cast at Fame 3-star, and Divine 1-star he both shields and buffs attack for the lowest HP officer. He also both gets and gives a 15% attack buff when deployed with Great Adventurer, and pairs well with him because you want to give Great Adventurer as much rage as you can get. King Arthur is actually moving up to SS tier as well. I think I had her S tier last time. She has pretty low AoE damage and applies a random debuff to the targets. She's got a low chance to restore rage for herself and an ally every time she applies a debuff. The debuffs are from a predetermined set, so you're not always going to get what you want. For every debuff on the target, damage is increased by 15% to that target, up to 45%. So as of right now, she's moving up just because of that. Slotting into the burn team, she's going to be really useful. And if you're looking for a support to increase your damage instead of throwing in another DPS that doesn't really work with your team, this is a great option. So if you're running the Lucifer and Lamia burn duo team, try slotting her in there. She's probably going to increase your damage quite a bit. Next, we have Laplace heading into the tank girls tier. She's got pretty good damage on paper, but she won't be dealing too much damage in practice. But she does heal herself for 30% of the damage. At only 9-star, she applies Invincible Shield to the 2 lowest HP officers after using her skill, which is why she pairs really well with Aquarius. At Fame 1-star, she buffs her damage reduction based on HP loss, and at Fame 3-star, makes her a priority attack target for single target attacks. Divine 1 rank gives her unyielding 1 hit with fatal damage, which lets her survive, buffs her attack, and makes it so 100% of the damage dealt is converted to HP. This only works 1 per battle, but it's a really great support unit on her own. But when paired with Aquarius, she's really good. Aquarius deals single target damage and gives her a shield of 70% worth of her HP for 2 turns. She shares 50% damage of teammates after casting her skill, and at Fame 1, she gets a 3.5% shield that every time she takes damage. At Fame 3, she has a chance to reduce enemy rage when attacked, and at Divine 1, her 3.5% shield applies to all allies. She's with Laplace because after her skill cast, when she shares the 50% damage for her teammates, she'll have an invincible shield from Laplace, which means your entire team will take 50% less damage, and the other 50% is going to hit the invincible shield on Aquarius. Laplace will also tank the single target damage skills, which pairs really well with her unyielding. This duo is going to start falling off pretty soon if it hasn't already. I've noticed some people using it less, because if you have the Blessing Servant max and the Sundering Behemoth ranked up fairly high, that should be more than enough sustain for your team. And plus you should be using Kong Ming in your team anyway, so you'll be getting some heals from there. It'll be interesting to see if this comes back in the future, but as of right now, I can see it starting to peter out and trail off, and not many people are using them, but they can still be pretty useful. Got Panda, of course, going into food. We also got Cyclops going into food. Attacks a column, gains 2 stacks of shield, which buff his defense and reduces damage taken. He loses a stack after every action. When ranked up enough, he won't lose stacks from basic attacks and will damage the attack based on defense. He may seem good like on paper, but you don't need tanks in this game. You don't want to deal chip damage from defense. Just use him as food. We also have Ares, which is split between food and S tier. Like, he does have some uses, so I'm going to put him in S tier. He does single target damage, applies a shield of 5% of his HP to all allies. What actually makes him usable though is the fact that he can remove debuffs from allies, although he like receives them instead of them. But at Fame 1 star, he actually applies that debuff to the target and then lowers their defense as well. He's pretty much decent not only because he removes debuffs from the allies, then applies it to enemies. In certain situations, this unit could be really good, but in general, you probably won't see any use coming from him. Next, we have Kango going into S tier. It's another unit you only need to use at the beginning of the game. He deals kind of lowish AoE damage, and he gains 2 rage upon killing an enemy at 9 star. He casts his skill again after killing an enemy with 50% damage at Fame 3, and at Divine 1, he gets 2 rage after every action. He's just a fill-in slot for a damage dealer at the start of the game, basically. Next, we have Moon going into SS tier. She deals column damage and self-buffs damage by 25% for 7 turns, and it's stackable, believe it or not. She also does a basic attack when she kills someone. After every basic attack, she buffs her damage by 10%. At Fame 1 star, a basic attack is performed after every skill cast, and at Fame 3 star, she has a 30% chance to do a basic attack if an ally crits. At Divine 1, she can execute enemies that have less than 9% HP. She's going to be doing a ton of extra attacks, and since fights are lasting longer and longer, she's just going to be doing better and better. Guan Yu is also heading into SS tier. I'm going to put him at the front because he can do some pretty crazy damage. He's really good single target damage that comes with a 45% crit rate buff and 35% crit damage buff and a control immunity. He can perform a basic attack after landing a crit, and at Fame 1 star, 90% of his skill damage will be used to heal. At Fame 3 star, he gets a chance to take a turn after each enemy officer's turn, and at Divine 1, he gets additional damage added to his skill if he crits. Really good single target damage dealer, and you can actually use him for a little bit longer. He's not going to fall off as hard as some of these other units. Kong Ming is actually our first triple S tier unit. This is the support unit you're going to want for basically every team going forward. He'll be very useful for a very long time. He heals all allies while also increasing their attack with his skill. Ranking him up gives him a chance to generate rage. At Fame 1 star, he also buffs allies' crit rate by 20% with his skill. At Fame 3 star, he has a 50% chance to cast his skill twice, although the healing and buffs will only apply at 50% effectiveness. At Divine 1, the rage generation is 100% and increased to 2 rage. A must-have for your team due to his rage gen and his buffs and his healing. Should be equipping him with Inferno Dragon and Sword of the Wild Antique to guarantee his skill goes off, and it goes off multiple times. Ren is going to be S tier, probably near the top. She's actually pretty good to use at the start of the game. Her skill reduces all her rage and attacks all enemies dealing pretty high damage. For every rage over 2, damage will be increased up to 30%. After the skill, she stuns herself for 2 turns, but if the skill kills someone, the stun is reduced to 1 turn. If built right and you put it into a specific type of team, she can actually be a viable part of the team for the early game. The self-stun just really holds her back, but I did see someone say that if Laplace has a shield on her, the stun actually won't land on herself, so something to keep in mind if you try using her at the beginning of the game. Next we have Joan of Arc going into food. Her skill deals good damage to 1 random unit. At Fame 1 star, she has a 50% chance to apply burn to an attacker. When she dies, she slightly buffs and heals everyone if she's at Divine 1 rank. It's not a very good unit, but even for burn teams, not very good. Especially since 2 of her talents need her to die, and you know what I think about that. It's a useless character if they have to die to do something. Next we got Great Adventurer going into Triple S tier. He's super good, and he's who you should be trying to get with your selection boxes and the item shop, stuff like that. He doesn't have a skill, but his basic attack gets turned into one, kind of. When attacking, for every rage you have, the final damage is increased by 40% up to a 400% cap in PvE. At Fame 1 star, he has an 11% chance to cast an extra attack. At Divine 1, when rage exceeds 8, his attack deals 100% extra damage to adjacent enemies, and when it exceeds 14, it deals 100% extra damage to all enemies. This combined with his extra damage based on how much rage he has, and he deals extremely high AoE damage. If you have him in your team should pretty much be built around giving him rage. And just keep in mind, any of the servants that have to do with skill damage are not going to work on him. You're just going to want basic attack servants for this guy, as well as just straight up attack or straight up damage. Portabell's next, and he's going into food. He's an okay burn unit, I guess. He deals single target damage and applies burn. Damage increases by 50% if the target's already under burn. At Fame 1 star, he gets a damage buff based on lost HP. Fame 3 star lets him inherit 9% HP as a shield of dead officers and 9% of their attack. His Divine 1 trait's pretty bad because it relies on 4 other units to die before it triggers. It gives him a good crit rate, crit damage buff, double skill cast, but you're only gonna have 2 units left if 4 units are dead, right? So just stay away from that guy. Nikita is going into S tier. Probably right about there. She heals all allies and buffs their damage reduction just a little bit. At 9 star, she gives 2 random allies magic shield, which resists a status ailment. Fame 1 star lets her rage skill purify status ailments at a 50% chance. Fame 3 star gives buffs to Legium officers, that's the green faction. Divine 1 star makes all allies receive the magic shield after a skill and get a small damage reduction buff. She's pretty good for going against debuffs, but so is her servant. So if you need a support, you can use her. If you don't need a support, like if you got Lady Zen, then you can just use her for food. So Musashi's next, and I'm going to put her at the back end triple S. She's kind of in between SS and triple S, but as the fights last longer and longer, like everybody's stats are going up, the enemies you're fighting against, their power is going to be like 10 times as much as yours, and she's going to start performing better and better. She does have high single target damage with her skill, and she can follow up with a basic attack if the enemy's HP is below 50%. She can also follow up with a basic attack when an ally attacks up to 5 times per turn. At Fame 3 star, she gets a 30% lifesteal, and Divine 1 star, her basic attack gets buffed after 10 uses and will cause 140% main target damage and 80% to others in the row. Now that fights are going to be lasting longer and longer, like I said, her damage potential is just going to get higher and higher. It's thanks to that overflow damage and adjacent damage from her Divine 1 talent, so that's why she's in triple S. Alice is next. I'm going to throw her into food tier. Her skill attacks front row enemies and has a low chance to burn. Her 9 star trait sacrifices 28% of her HP to give everybody a 4% damage reduction. That's kind of silly. Really not that good. Fame 1 star gives her an okay chance to apply burn to the attackers. Fame 3 star heals her a bit when she burns an enemy. And Divine 1 star heals allies when she dies. She is just bad. Next we got Ninja going into food. Now we got Ignis Scorpio going into S tier. I'm probably going to put her at the top actually. She's not too bad. She deals decent single target damage and buffs 2 allied officers with the lowest HP with 15% lifesteal and 20% crit damage. She can also generate 2 rage for herself and the lowest HP ally after casting a skill. At Fame 1 star, she has a low chance to give a shield to 2 officers, and at Fame 3 star, the officers who get a shield get purged of all their debuffs and gain CC immunity for 1 turn. At Divine 1 star, the officers shielded by her get more lifesteal, damage bonus, and crit damage, or crit bonus. Not too bad at the start of the game. Frost Edge, I'm going to throw into food tier. She attacks an enemy in the front row, restores 1 rage for herself. At 9 stars, she's got a small chance to reduce enemies' rage by 1 after a basic attack. At Fame 1, she has a good chance to reduce enemy rage by 1 after casting a skill. And at Fame 3 star, if she reduces enemy rage to 0, it will stun them. At Divine 1, each rage reduction is increased to 2 rage, but she's still got that low 15% chance for a basic attack and a good chance of 60% for skill casts. The stun's not going to happen that much though, because with Kongming having Inferno Dragon and the Sword of the Wild, he's going to get off multiple rage buffing AoEs, and everybody's going to be pretty stacked up on rage, and if they even drop pretty low, then Sundering Behemoth's going to come in and raise it up again. So if you're looking for a stun unit, there's going to be a much better one coming up. Hera, I'm going to put into SS tier, just above Gilgamesh. Her skill attacks an enemy in the back row, has a 50% chance to steal rage. At 9 star, her skill applies an invincible shield to the lowest HP officer for 2 turns. This could also work with Aquarius, but the shield lasts longer than Aquarius's damage sharing. At Fame 1 star, makes it so stolen rage is returned to her and the highest attack ally. At Fame 3 star, she has a chance to restore rage to the highest attack ally, up to 3 rage. Her invincible shield is really nice, but she's super good for reducing enemy rage and buffing our rage, specifically for the Great Adventurer teams. Lamia is next and going into the Burn Duo. She's a really good damage dealer when paired with the next unit. Her skill attacks all enemies and it can trigger up to 3 times in a row, with the chance increasing for each enemy with a burn debuff. If you're going to build a burn team, she's the unit you'll need to actually deal good damage. Every time an enemy takes burn damage, she buffs her damage up to 125%. She can buff her crit rate and restore HP up to 100% at Fame 1 star based on the true fire stacks that she has. What's really good though is her ability to detonate burns at Fame 3 star, and at Divine 1 star she increases all burn damage by 25% and reduces damage of enemies detonated by 12%. But you're going to want to pair her with Lucifer. His skill attacks all enemies, has a 40% chance to apply burn. At 9-star, his basic attacks get a 60% chance to apply burn, and at Fame 1-star, increases all burn damage by 20%. At Fame 3-star, units that receive burn that already have it will take 45% more damage, up to 4 stacks for 2 turns. At Divine 1, burns spread to adjacent officers for 2 turns when it disappears from an enemy. And as you can see with all his burn buffs and helping apply more burns, it's going to be really good to pair with Lamia. Scion next and is going into food now. He deals damage to 3 enemies, applies bleed to them. One of the only good things about bleed is the reduced healing received to the enemy under the bleed debuff. They can stack up to deal some okay-ish damage, I guess, but he's never going to be like a dedicated damage dealer, and with the other healing reduction coming from like Dark Satan Martial Soul and the Beyond Beast, you really don't need this guy anymore. Phoenix is next, and I'm going to throw her into food. Her skill restores HP of the lowest HP ally to the HP of the highest HP ally up to a max of 400% of attack. She buffs Ignis officers only at 9 stars, and she buffs damage of the healed officer at Fame 3-star. Divine 1-star, she restores rage in the same way her skill heals. Her heals can be really hit and miss depending on the HP distribution of your team though. And with Sundering Behemoth out, which basically does the same thing but like way better, only use her if you need a healer or if you don't have Sundering Behemoth on a lot of your units, because her heals might do very little sometimes, so you're better off just with a dedicated healer. It's a little bit of a gambling healer, kind of. So we got, what, Abe no Seime, food, what's that, Hephaestus food, Geo food, Lubu, SS tier. I'm putting him right around the middle, I guess. He's here for his great damage. His skill's an AoE, which triggers his basic attack, which is also an AoE. After hit with the basic attack, he's got a 50% chance to counter attack up to 3 times per turn, all of which will be AoE attacks. At Fame 1-star, his basic attack gets a damage buff and deals even more damage if the target is bewitched, which is a debuff from Medusa. At Fame 3-star, the counter attack can happen 5 times per turn, and Divine 1 gives his basic attacks a 36% lifesteal, and every 5th attack deals 100% more damage. He's a pretty good secondary DPS for your team. Tai Chi is going to be food. Attacks all enemies with low damage. He's really low chance to poison them. Hit with a basic attack, he also has a low chance to poison. Fame 1-star's poison chance is tripled up to 30%, which still isn't that great. Fame 3-star lets him transmit a debuff to a poisoned unit, and Divine 1's chance of poison is raised again. There's just really no reason to use this guy unless you've literally just started the game. Shirley is going into S tier. I'm put her near the end a little bit. Slot her in right there. She deals decent burn damage to a column, has a high chance to lower the hit rate, which is 9-star, she can spread burns. Fame 1-star, skill can apply silence. At Fame 3-star, the damage for each debuff on enemies increased by 20% up to 80%. What? I actually forgot she did that. I'm going to throw her right at the top just for that. The debuff damage increase and the chance to stun, pretty good. It's just her Divine 1 trait. Only works for a specific character, so she doesn't really slot into a team that well because of that. King Arthur does the damage buffs a little bit better. Better units for stun, which is basically what a silence is, so she'll be in the top of S tier. Next we got Yukihime heading to SS tier, right between these two. She does damage to all enemies that has a 45% chance to dispel a buff for them. She's got a 60% chance of gaining rage when other ally officers gain rage. At Fame 1-star, she's got a 23% chance to dispel a buff when the enemy receives one, which is really good. Up to twice per round per target. After she uses her skill, it reduces enemy rage by 1. At Fame 3-star. At Divine 1, each time a buff is dispelled from the enemy, they take 10% of their HP as damage, and Yukihime gains 1 rage. I've actually seen her deal some pretty good damage, even though she's like a support unit. So she's worth using, that's for sure. There's even a guy in the other game, I think he's around like 3 billion power, and he still uses this unit. Medusa, I'm going to throw into S tier because she's perfectly usable at the beginning of the game. Probably right about there. Or no, right there. One more over. Her skill attacks 2 enemies, has a 45% chance to bewitch them, which means they can't take action or generate rage, so it's basically a stun. At 9-star, if the bewitch fails, the target loses 1 rage. At Fame 1-star, boosts Terra officers' attack and damage, which is the like the Earth officers. At Fame 3-star, it gives a 25% chance to bewitch a random enemy at the battle start, and at Divine 1, whenever Bewitched ends, it'll heal her and the lowest HP ally by 8%. Bewitched is really good at the start of the game because one of the only ways to stun people at the beginning of the game, and it has a pretty good chance to proc. If you throw her Servant on her, it will give her even more chances to bewitch, but she falls off pretty quickly, so that's why she's like middle of the road S tier. Asclepios is next, and she's going into S tier, probably a little bit better than Lady Zen. She heals all allies and gives a small heal over time to them with her skill. Her basic attacks also does single target healing. At 9 stars, she performs a special heal on a unit the first time their HP drops below 50%. She gives a small crit rate and damage buff to the healed targets at Fame 1 star, and at Fame 3 star, she has a high chance to apply a magic shield. At Divine 1, she can revive the first defeated ally, but this can only happen once per battle. She's just been falling down the list because of the Dragon Conquest Antique and the Sundering Behemoth Colossus make her revives a little more irrelevant because it's taken up a whole unit slot just for a one-time revive when the Colossus and Antiques can do it better. And before we get into the SP units, I just want to remind anyone who is interested, check out my affiliate code from Aptoid in the description below. There'll be a link to a video showing you how to use it, and you'll get 10 to 30% back on all your in-game purchases that you can actually use to spend in-game. So before we get going, let's just get these guys out of the way. That's Shirley, Potamus, and Spartacus. Those are all food, obviously. So now we have Valkyrie. Throw her in triple S tier just behind Great Adventurer. She got the exact same skills as Guan Yu, but her talents are just a little bit different. She'll be hitting really hard with her single target skill, as well as buffing her damage and healing herself. Her 9-star talent isn't extra basic attacks when landing a crit like Guan Yu's is. Instead, she makes the Wrath self buff last for 3 turns and makes it undispellable. Her Fame 1-star talent's the same, except that it heals her for 100% damage and not 90%. Her Fame 3-star talent is also the same, except she doesn't get a chance for extra turn after enemy's officer's turn. She gets an extra chance for a turn after an ally lands a crit. Her Divine 1 trait's totally different and gives all allied officers a 15% damage reduction buff and a 20% defense buff. But the reason you'd want to get her is her Martial Soul. As Soul 1 grants the officer and ally 1 stack of Hellfire on the battle start, which increases crit rate and crit damage by 20%, as well as making it so the damage received doesn't exceed 60% HP in a single hit. Soul 3 grants Hellfire to 3 enemies, and the damage cap won't exceed 40% HP. Soul 6 attacks the enemy officer with the highest rage upon skill cast and inflicts an undispellable and irresistible rage seal for 1 turn, which prohibits rage regeneration. Soul 8 makes it so her rage can only be reduced to 4, so she's always going to be able to get her skill off, and it also increases the crit rate and damage of Hellfire to 30%. Soul 10 grants Hellfire to all allies on the battle start, increases the crit rate and damage buff to 40%, and gives an ally 1 stack of Hellfire anytime their HP drops below 60% for the first time. With Blessing maxed out though, her Martial Soul isn't needed as much, at least for sustain wise in your team, because Hellfire will go away after taking a hit. Even though it's slightly better and limits the HP loss to 40%, Blessing only limits it to 50%, but it lasts for the entire fight. So she's still good, but she's not as good as the other SP units, that is. Dark Satan is next and heading to the top of the triple S tier. If you have her to Soul 6, like see mine's only 5 right there. Soul 6 definitely above Great Adventurer. Anything lower than that, probably around tied, like Soul 3 is probably tied with Great Adventurer. And if you have her at Soul 0, she's not as good as Great Adventurer. But she's going to be doing an absolute ton of extra attacks. Like she can even do an extra attack when she kills someone with a basic attack. I'll throw up some footage right now actually showing her absolutely just obliterating an enemy team. She attacks a column, self-buffs her attack by 25% for 7 turns, which is stackable. Does a basic attack if the skill kills an enemy. At 9 star, she buffs damage by 10% for 7 turns, which is also stackable. At Fame 1 star, basic attack follows a skill cast. At Fame 3 star, she has a 30% chance to do a basic attack whenever an ally lands a crit. And she can execute enemies under 12% HP at Divine 1. But where she gets really crazy is her Martial Soul. At Martial Soul 1, she gains 1 stack of Dragon Breath after each action, which increases crit and hit rate by 6% up to 20 stacks. Every 5 stacks will inflict Dragon Breath Realm on enemies, which reduces their healed and healing by 40% for 3 turns. At Soul 3, she gains 2 stacks of Dragon Breath at the start of the battle, which now buff crit and hit rate by 10% each, and increases the Dragon Breath Realm healing and shield reduction to 60%. At Soul 6, she gets even more damage by dealing 1.5% more damage to the enemy for every 1% of HP they're missing. That can add up to a lot. Also, when the target's HP is below 40%, she'll attack them once. At Soul 8, she gets 5 stacks of Dragon Breath at the start of the battle, and Dragon Breath Realm now lasts for 6 turns. The damage bonus from Soul 6 increases to 2% for every 1% HP lost, and at Soul 10, she now gets a stack of Dragon Breath, a 10% attack buff, a 10% defense buff, and restores 10% of her HP whenever a unit dies. She now also casts a skill on enemies when they drop below 40% HP once per battle against each enemy. She's got like an extremely high damage potential, while also crippling enemies' shield and healing. Like she's a really, really good unit. Annie's up next, and unfortunately going into S tier. She's not that great. I'll probably put her She can be used situationally, like she'd either be in the back end of trip double S or around here in S. It just all depends, but in general, she's not very good. Her skill attacks 3 random enemies. She will then attach to an officer with the highest attack and give them a damage resist up to 100% of Annie's max HP. The officer will get a damage buff of 30%, a hit buff of 30%, and at 9-star, he'll be able to do an extra basic attack that will crit when they cast a skill at Fame 1-star. She'll also increase the rage by 2 for the officer she attaches to, and at Fame 3-star, and give him a shield of 30% HP at Divine 1-star. The thing is though, she's going to attach to the ally with the highest attack, right? And the Cinder Dragon is just going to immediately exile them in turn 1. So you really don't need like that little bit of extra sustain. It's going to be wasted in the first turn, first of all. And if you want extra sustain, there's just better units to go for. And she doesn't slot into a team. She doesn't do much, and she's very easily countered. So next we have Oda Nobunaga, who's in a weird spot right now because she should have been released with the SP burn unit that's going to be coming. We got her really early, so I'm going to put her in SS tier, probably right about here. When her partner unit gets released, she's going straight to triple S tier though. Keep in mind she needs to be paired with Lamia to work well though, unless you're using her in PvP just for her AoE stuns, which are crazy. Her skills in AoE has 50% chance to stun enemies with the fire effect, and as far as I know, fire, burn, flame, all that is functionally the same thing. For each 1 stun target, the chance of stun reduces by 5% permanently, and it has a 70% chance to apply officers with 1 turn of burn if they're under the fire effect. At 9-star, she increases burn damage by 20%, has a 40% chance to make burns undispellable and increase them by 1 turn after skill use. That's really good. At Fame 1-star, she restores 1 random ally officer's rage by 1 up to 6 per turn when the enemy officer's fire effect is blocked or disappears. At Fame 3 skill has a 100% chance of applying burn to an enemy that doesn't have fire, and when fire is blocked or disappears, there's a 50% chance to increase her rage by 1 up to 4 per turn. Divine 1 makes her skill have a 100% chance to stun, 100%, and it won't fall below 20%, as well as a 30% chance to stun enemies not under the fire debuff. So 100% chance of an AoE stun. That's nuts. And all those burn effects, burn buffs, making them undispellable, increasing their turns. Like, it's just so good for a burn team. And finally, we got Dark Lu Bu, which if you have him at like Martial Soul 1, 2, 3, something like that, he'd be right at the end. If you got him Martial Soul 10, he's probably right below Dark Satan. So I'm just gonna throw him right in the middle. Either there or there, just pretend there's a middle and he's gonna be in it. He's capable of some like crazy damage, but he needs a lot of investment to stand up to the test of time. Like that means at least Martial Soul 10 for the long run, right? And some of the new servants that'll be coming out, he's gonna need them as well. He's got an AoE basic attack and an AoE skill that also procs a basic attack. At 9-star, he has a 50% chance to counterattack 3 times per turn. At Fame 1, he gets a damage buff for basic attacks, and at Fame 3, his counterattack chance drops to 40%, but he can do it up to 5 times per turn now. At Divine 1, he gains a 36% lifesteal, and every 4 attacks increase the final damage of the next attack by 100%, which should come pretty fast because he's going to be doing a lot of counterattacks. At Martial Soul 1, he can inflict 3 enemies with the Slaughter debuff, which causes them to lose 2% HP for every point of rage they have, up to 30% of Lu Bu's max HP, up to once per action, and each time it procs, they lose 1 stack. At Soul 3, each time Slaughter deals damage, Lu Bu has a 60% chance to pursue with an attack that deals 13% extra lifesteal, which is also going to be an AoE attack, right? At Soul 6, 5 enemies receive Slaughter, which causes them to lose 6% HP up to 40% of Lu Bu's max HP, and after each action, final damage increases by 5% for 3 turns up to 100%. Martial Soul 8 is where things start to heat up though, as he inflicts Slaughter on all enemies, and every time Slaughter damages an enemy, he'll pursue with a basic attack up to 3 times per turn, and with an extra 25% lifesteal. At Soul 10, whenever an ally dies, all enemies get a stack of Slaughter, but it doesn't trigger an attack. It will restore HP equal to all their lost HP to Lu Bu up to once per turn and twice per battle. As you can see, he needs at least Soul 8 for him to be like a viable damage dealing unit. Since his AoE attacks actually, his basic attack does like 30% damage and his skill like 90. So it's a lot lower than normal. He's just doing a lot of them. So he really needs the help from Soul 8. And that is finally the end of the tier list 3.0. Like always, if you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. And if you're interested in checking out my affiliate code link from Aptoweed, it's in the description below. And I'll also include a link to the subreddit I made for this game as well, if you want to ask questions in there, share pictures, stuff like that. And yeah, I'll catch you next time. See ya.